So today I have a very special guest, an old school friend of mine, which is Joey Speed. Joey, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ross. Good to be here.
Yeah, lovely to have you. Got you in between quite a lot of traveling.
Yeah, back from Colombia in a week into Italy. After that, Barcelona. So yeah, you got me on a lucky time.
Which we will hear all about.
Yes.
So, just for anyone who's wondering, Joey is an old school friend of mine, and we've been friends for a very long time now, ever since we were about 11 years old. But for those listening, Joey, do you want to take us through your story since leaving school at 18 to now at 28? Because it's been quite a varied time for you.
Yeah. So went to the University of Leeds, studied business management, which was really enjoyable, mainly for the social aspect of it. And I didn't get incredible grades. I wasn't like an exemplary student by any means, but came out with a 2-1. And in the middle of that, I got onto a scheme called Year in Enterprise, which was essentially university funding to start a business. That was my first kind of step into officially running my own business, I suppose. Failed miserably for a variety of reasons.
What was that business?
That was called Roundabout Events, and it started as a events logistics business where we transported hundreds of students from Leeds to Newcastle, and that was very successful the first time round. And I got a bit too big for my boots, and it kind of fell on its face a little bit when I tried to organise 5 different cities and buses going from city to city. It was an absolute nightmare. But also, on the very first day of getting my funding for the business, I was drugged in a nightclub and lost all of my money, which wasn't a great way to start your first business, but made for a good story.
And what happened there again?
I was celebrating for getting the investment into it. Was £5,000, so it's not a huge amount in the grand scheme of things, but at the time it was huge. And I went out with my friends, and the next thing I remember, I was on the streets in a different kind of town, like 20, 30 minutes away from Leeds, with no memory, no phone, no wallet. All I had was some Rizzlers in my top pocket from when I used to smoke cigarettes. And stumbled my way home, which took me like 2 hours because of how far away I was, and then fell asleep for almost 24 hours before kind of realising that, I have nothing on me. Called the police, called my bank, and said there was nothing in it. And that led me to having to cancel the events that I had planned for the subsequent 3 or 4 weeks. And I lost all my deposit. So I came out of it with nothing. But the bank did refund me the money a couple months later.
So that was the end of Roundabout?
No, that was the starting point of trying to rebuild Roundabout from the ground, but with much less money because I'd lost about 3,000 or 4,000 of my own money in the deposits.
Right.
At the time, it was the end of the world. But looking back, it was a good experience in terms of having to get past a crazy hurdle at the very, very beginning. But it didn't set the business off on the greatest foot.
And that was business one?
This was the first registered business, yeah.
Right. And then Roundabout ends when?
At the end of that year in enterprise, I'd made back about five grand of, put in 10 grand, lost 5 grand of that basically, with various successes and failures in the middle of it. Decided not to continue with it because I didn't like events. I was obsessed with the idea of starting a business that at the time that I applied to enter the year in enterprise, I didn't really care what the business was. And then having run the business for a year, I was unbelievably low and broken at the bottom of that year because it wasn't a big success. I didn't really enjoy the work. I didn't like being branded as an event owner. So I then went back to university to complete my final year.
Okay, and then end of final year, you leave Leeds and you go, is it straight to Fujitsu?
Yeah, went to Fujitsu, which obviously is in the news for the wrong reasons at the moment.
Yeah.
But I loved that. I wanted to go into a sales role. At the time, it was about earning money, and the best opportunity to do that was in sales. I'd applied for about 20 different grad roles and got 2, BT and Fujitsu just felt more right for me. But yeah, that first that first year and a half at Fujitsu was excellent. I loved it. I loved being in London. I loved the hustle and bustle. I loved the fact that I was actually doing something that felt productive in life rather than learning about business. I was actually doing business. So I enjoyed it, yeah.
And that was your first and only 9 to 5?
Yes.
So far.
So far, yeah, my fingers crossed. Yeah.
But why was it you decided at Fujitsu? Because you did quite well at Fujitsu, didn't you?
Yeah, I was the highest performing sales graduate ever.
Well done.
Yeah, I don't want to sound cocky, but yeah, I sold a £4.5 million deal, which was 8 times larger than the next highest deal.
What was the commission on that?
High 5 figures.
High 5 figures. Wow. So that was at the age of 21, 22?
22.
Okay. And a high 5 figure commission. That's pretty cool.
I actually was owed 200 grand from that deal, but they didn't pay me that because they thought it would be unfair.
Robbed.
And that was one of the reasons I started to go against them.
Well, that's the next question. Why did you think, okay, 9 to 5, not for me?
Initially, it wasn't that it wasn't a 9 to 5. It was that I was frustrated that I wasn't paid what I was owed. So like at the start of the year, you got a commission plan. I'd performed against the commission plan and then they didn't pay me it. So that was the initial kind of frustration that I'm not in charge. You know, I'm at the mercy of these people. And I felt a bit of a victim, you know, at that point with frustration. Got over it, got a pay rise on my basic salary. So they kind of like did what they needed to do to cheer me up a bit. But as that next year went on, I was going like, I don't want to be a tiny cog in this giant machine. I want to do something entrepreneurial again, which was strange actually, because after Roundabout, I thought to myself, no, entrepreneurship's not for me. But that bug, that kind of itch to do it came back.
And you've actually said this a lot about entrepreneurship. And this may be one area we actually disagree on. Do you think entrepreneurship is genuinely for anyone?
Under the right circumstances, yes, for sure. Because I don't think entrepreneurship is what people think entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship can be literally anything. It doesn't have to be about making a giant business or making millions and millions of pounds. It doesn't have to be that. Starting a free newsletter or starting an Instagram account about cooking is entrepreneurship because you're creating something out of nothing. And I think everybody perceives that you have to be this kind of big expert or have this crazy vision or grand plans, when in reality you don't. You know, you can start really small. So yes, in that sense, I do think everyone can be an entrepreneur. I don't think everyone can be a massively successful entrepreneur when it comes to the size of the company and the scale of it.
Okay. And then you decide to leave Fujitsu and you start a company, and we are talking like a company this time,
yes.
And I believe it was a recruitment company.
Recruitment company for my sins, yeah.
Talk me through it.
My cousin, Toby, was already working in recruitment, and he'd been bugging me for about 2 years to come and start a recruitment business with him. And I'd always said, no, I'm not going to go anywhere near that industry because the reputation of recruiters isn't particularly positive, and I didn't want to be in that bracket. And I suppose he was persistent enough where the idea was always in my head. And when things got bad at Fujitsu, that seemed like a really easy route into being a big cog in a small machine as opposed to a small cog in a big machine. And then again, I kind of like got lost in the numbers. So that's basically a trend of my early stages, was following the money. And they were really big numbers. And I thought, wow, this is going to be quite easy. It will be quite fun because I'm doing it with someone else rather than struggling myself like I did in the first business. And yeah, it was just a really simple kind of transition into it. It didn't take a huge amount of planning. I'd also told my boss 4 months before I quit that I was going to be doing it. So I knew I had some financial security to plan in the background. And yeah, so it worked out really, really well, that transition, just after COVID, which was a great market for recruitment.
Is that when you started? Was it just after COVID?
Yeah.
And that was a good time for recruitment. Yeah,
so we launched August 22. No. August 20? August 2020. And yeah, that's just when the post everything kind of like crashing, there was huge amounts of venture capital money being funneled into tech businesses, and that was our market. So they had so much cash to spend that the fees that we charged, 20% of starting salaries, was not that much for them to spend. And therefore, for us, we really cleaned up. In that first 6 months, had made 157 grand, which is crazy.
First 6 months, you made 157 grand.
Yeah,
that is very good going.
Within 3 months, it was 24 grand. That's from a standing start, from no clients.
And talk to me about how much of a part was that purely strategy? Was that luck? How did you actually do that? Because a lot of people hear that and go, "Wow."
Honestly, it wasn't that hard. We did 2 weeks of cold calling. The very first 2 weeks, we amassed 4 large clients, and then we delivered for those clients. It's really not more complicated than that. Had we not done that 2 weeks of cold calling, when we were probably calling 100 numbers a day, but it was fun. It was enjoyable. Like at the start is the most exciting part, and when you're with someone else to share the bad times and the good times, that 2 weeks was really, really fun because we'd get a proper buzz off a successful cold call. And because Toby had worked in recruitment, he knew how to deliver. So I kind of just operated in the account management, business management side of things. And yeah, we got a bit of luck. Got a really, really big client very, very early.
And I think that element of it as well, you took on a lot of business responsibility and the company was called Placeable for anyone interested. Still going, shout out to Toby Speed. How much did you actually learn about business by just starting one?
Because I'd already started Roundabout, I knew a lot of the pitfalls. So in Roundabout, I didn't focus too much on business development. I more wanted to create the perfect product and hope people would buy that. With Placeable, I knew that that's just not going to work. So we have to do a lot of outbound at the beginning, which we did, and it worked. I think at the time, I thought I knew a lot. And in hindsight, I didn't really know much. I think I knew what entrepreneurship was to me. But since then, and the experiences over the last 12 to 18 months, I've learned a huge amount more about how it differs from person to person.
Yeah, and there's the saying, right now, you know the most you ever have known and the least you ever will know.
Yes.
And it's quite hard to know that actually in 50 years I'll be incredibly more clever and knowledgeable than I am right now, but I still have to make all these decisions with the information I have. So how do you find that being a young entrepreneur compared to all these people who've been doing it for years? And there's clearly a big knowledge gap, yet you still have to operate anyway.
I feel very much an imposter in lots of situations. I don't think that will ever go. I think that will always be there. When you get like, especially when I was in Colombia, I was surrounded by various entrepreneurs frequently, and they were performing way above however I've performed in the past, and older. And you feel very uncomfortable in that situation, but once you kind of accept that no one's out to kind of make you feel small and most people are there to help you, you get the odd person who wants to kind of stroke their ego and be a bit brash and rude. But yeah, I feel like an imposter regularly, but equally I feel like I'm top 1% at the same time. In terms of the variety of experience I've got at this point in my life, I do feel like I know a lot, but I still feel like there's a lot more to learn. But a lot of it is inward rather than outward. And
that balance you just spoke about there's that study of successful entrepreneurs, and it says they all have 3 things in common. The first is a feeling that they're ahead of other people or have more talent or more to give than other people. The second is that feeling of I'm not necessarily enough, I need to improve, I need to get better, a bit of imposter syndrome. And the third is impulse control. Mm-hmm. Where do you think you fall on that?
First two, so the first one around how you feel against other people. I don't feel like I'm more talented than anyone. In fact, I feel like very much a jack of all trades. I think I'm kind of right in the middle, but right in the middle of everything, which I think is a strength for me. When I was at Fujitsu, for example, I would look around and be confused as to why people weren't trying harder or why they didn't care as much as I did. And I do think that's something that is a strength of mine, is I know that I'm capable of a lot, but that's not through talent, that's more through will Imposter syndrome or feeling like I'm not good enough, yes, all the time. But equally, I know that I have to do it, and therefore, even though I feel that, I'm able to kind of push past it at a lot of points. Impulse control, just none of it. I'm incredibly impulsive. For example, when I sold Placeable within kind of 2 weeks of deciding I didn't want to work there, and then moved to Columbia, and then tried to start 4 or 5 businesses well out there that didn't take off the ground. So yeah, that's a real issue of mine. But equally, I think it is a strength in a very, very weird way. I don't know if you've read the originals.
I'm not.
It talks around volume being the best way to succeed in business. If you look at people like Beethoven, they're known for 5 pieces, but they compose 1600. So the theory is the more you start, the more you do, the more likely you are to hit the jackpot. And that's where that impulse control thing actually could be a strength. It's kind of caused me to start a variety of businesses, and hopefully I will land on the one that explodes.
Is that a bit like throw enough shit at the wall,
yeah,
and some will stick? Is that essentially? Yeah, I definitely think there's some truth in that, and everyone talks about it as a bit cliche now that the more you fail, the more you figure out how to succeed. Thomas Edison tried for the light bulb this many times, got on the last one. Do you think it's that perfection, that search for perfection, that stops people having a go?
I've done a study on this, which 300 aspiring founders responded to, of like why don't they start? Number one was not having the finances to, and number two was fear of failure, like being mocked by other people. And I think that's probably born out of social media nowadays. Like you don't want to be seen as a failure, whereas back in the day prior to social media, I think it was probably a bit more common just to be like, yeah, I'm going to go give it a go, which is ironic because there's so many more opportunities now with the internet. But yeah, interesting about you. What was your impulse control imposter?
I think definitely the first two are there. There's this feed. But have you heard of the above average bias? So
No.
The above average bias is the idea that on the whole, people judge themselves to be better at desirable traits than other people. But everyone thinks that they're better on average at desirable traits on the whole. However, when people were told about the above average bias, they all agreed that it exists, but they didn't think it affected them, thus proving the reality of it. So I definitely think, but then I'd even say you still think you feel like you've got more to give, whatever it is. Definitely have that. Always need to prove yourself, always feel that. And that doesn't come from anything necessarily negative, like my childhood made me feel. I just think I feel like I've got something to prove. I think a lot of people do. Impulse control depends what it is.
How did it compare from your time going into professional rugby versus your time starting a business?
Professional rugby is different because where you are is a lot clearer because you have the players around you. I remember going from being 18 and being, the school captain to going into professional rugby and being one of the worst people in the squad. And that's quite hard to deal with mentally, and that's where a lot of players will fall off in terms of their attitude, because some people go in and say, I don't care what's going on around me. I know how good I am, and I'm going to just show it, even if it annoys the older players. Some players try and shy down in order to, not annoy anyone. And actually, that doesn't help you get to where you need to be, and it slows it down. And I didn't realise that for about 3 years. Whereas business, you can very much operate in the shadows quite a bit and work away. And it's not as obvious because you're not being pitted against people directly, so to speak. It's not like 5 people enter doing the same business as me at the same time. We see who does better. So there's a more direct comparison in sport, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what about going from feeling an imposter within a team environment like sports to starting your own business where it's just you? Was there a difference in feeling an imposter more within a generic field or market versus an actual team?
Yes, I think because, again, in rugby, I remember having a conversation with one of my friend's dads when I was about 18, and I knew I'd signed for London Irish. And I remember him asking me, what my goals were, and I was like, well, it must have been 2014. I remember saying, well, 2015 World Cup's a bit soon, but, maybe not that. However, the Lions tour 2 years later would be my goal. And I remember genuinely thinking that was doable. I thought, well, I'll join London Irish. I'll end up starting in the team, then probably soon get picked for England. And then you actually join and you suddenly go, oh my God, I'm so far off this. Like, I can barely get into the A-League side, let alone the starting team, let alone England, let alone, and that's how quickly it went like that. Business, I think there's a lot of you don't know what you don't know. And if I had known what it would take to start a business when I started it, which you helped to do, I think I probably would have gone, that's a bit beyond me. But because it happens so gradually and you just keep going and going and going, you look back, you've actually built something quite cool, but you don't know it as much. Whereas in rugby, first day, you realise where you're at and how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
But certainly I did. That was my experience.
And you don't have any, well, in most cases, people don't get a coach when they start a business. No. And therefore, that thing you said around you don't know what you don't know, so like the only truth that an aspiring entrepreneur needs to know is that you can find an answer. And I think knowing that you don't know everything and that's kind of normal and okay, but you're going to be capable of finding an answer, I think would provide quite a lot of comfort.
Definitely. I think with business as well, it's a very well-trodden path. Obviously, every business is slightly different, but there are a lot of answers out there. I think in the world of professional sport, you are at the whims of a lot of other factors. You may need the right thing to happen with injuries that, you don't have much control over that other than some stretching. You've got other people at the wrong time in your position. Maybe this coach doesn't like you. Maybe there's a lot of things that you kind of need to fall into your place, as well as working incredibly hard, maintaining a good mental state of mind and able to, when you do get your chance. Because I remember when being a squad player at Premiership club, right? You may get one shot that year in a proper game if you've worked hard enough, played well in the A-League, played well in the Prem Cup. You might get one shot. Now, very few people have a great game every game, but you have to be on your mettle, even though you've never played that level before. You have to do it unbelievably well the first time, and not just that. You then have to do it the next game, the next game, the next game, until you've got enough cash in the bank where they pick you and you can afford to have a bad game. But if you look at all the top players in the world, they're not having a top game every single game, and they're the top players in the world. So it's a very you don't get a lot of rope to hang yourself with in the world of professional sports. And that was something for me. My best game was a good game, but I was never consistent enough to warrant that regular starting spot.
Did that teach you anything about when you came into starting a business? Like, what was the lesson from that?
I think I was always very afraid of mucking up in my career. And I think that would be something I took into business, was it's okay to muck up. You don't have to be. And in order to get better at things, you have to be bad at them first. I didn't like in professional rugby to be seen as being bad at things, which meant you were less likely to get better at them because you didn't want to expose that weakness in training. And
that must have been very difficult when you go into a world where you don't know so much about it, whereas in rugby you knew all the technical skills, all the teamwork elements, but then when you transition into starting a business, like to your point earlier, you don't know what you don't know. If you're then afraid to make a mistake, that transition must have been incredibly difficult.
Absolutely. I think, luckily, I did have you when I was starting the business, and I remember thinking, starting my business, everyone will just lap this up and I'll go in and work with companies, they'll all love it, it'll be great. I didn't think it would be hard to acquire clients. And that's kind of I look now and I go, how did you not know that?
Yeah.
It's everyone's problem. Everyone's main thing is acquiring clients. And I thought I'd put myself out there on LinkedIn, I'd be flooded with messages from CEOs, and there we are. That didn't happen. It took me probably 3-4 months to land like a proper client that didn't know me at all to actually say, yes, come work with us. And I remember thinking, this is never going to happen. No one is ever going to say yes. And then it happens. But then you realise how hard it is.
Yeah. I still have that naive belief across every business I start that it's going to just take off from the word go. I also think for me, it's important to have high levels of optimism at the start rather than tons of realism. I enjoy the thing I love most about business is the start. It's the excitement of building it. It's when you first take it to the market. Often results in like a bit of a letdown when it's not kind of received as you want it to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like to get carried away with things.
Well, this is a point because we've spoken about this before, but there is a state of mind and a situation that people are in which makes them more likely to succeed when they start a business. And often that is no other option. And you've spoken to that quite a lot. Take me through that model we discussed.
Yeah, so it started when I was in Colombia, and essentially over that period I was rubbing shoulders with dozens of entrepreneurs from all around the world, Canada, the US, Colombia itself, all over Europe, Australia. And I was always really interested to understand, like, why did they start? And for pretty much every single one, it came back to this "I had no other choice" statement for whatever reason in their life. And what became interesting to me was the fact that some of them really didn't have another choice. Like, no income, no ability to get a job. I just have to start. But other ones were doing incredibly well within corporate roles or startup ecosystems themselves. A lot of money, a lot of security. But they felt like they had no other option. And that was more of a, I want to achieve X freedom in a lot of cases. And the only way I can do that is through this. I've got no other option. And then I started looking at pretty much all founder stories, and the same kind of traits seem to be common with all of them. And when you think about it, it's quite obvious. Like, why would you enter a world of lots of risk and lots of lack of security, where you're putting your head, your heart on the line to the world for it to be trod down upon, unless you have no other option? And I think that is the only way that a successful business will start, is if you have that unrelenting desire, because you have no other option to go back to, because it will help you get over the speed bumps that will come thick and fast in that first period.
Yeah, it's a bit like, there's a saying with, if you ever been to a car park and you see this little flower that buds out the middle of the crack in the tarmac, and it's like, plants will literally find anything they can to survive. It's like, well, if I can get a bit of water. But some founders are a bit like that. They are just looking for any reason to do well. And if you're desperately looking for that, you will end up finding it. There is a way. In business, there's enough money out there. There's enough people with problems. You can fix it if you want to. But if you don't really have that drive, you're going to get hit by a lot of different directions, and you're probably going to go back to what your other option is.
Oh yeah, it's ludicrously hard to start a business, especially for the first time. The experience you have from failing a business carries so much weight. The people that I kind of working with at the moment start a business. The thing I said, it doesn't matter if this one fails. Like, my business that succeeded was my second or third business. Like, you're going to take lessons into this. And this is what I don't like about social media and entrepreneurship at the moment, which is, there's one half of people that are saying, oh, entrepreneurship is unbelievably hard. You've got to absolutely grind. It's the only way. Hard work, hard work, hard work. And then there's the other side, which is massive oversimplification of the process, when the reality is that it is a multi-year process to start a business or a series of businesses. And stage one is about practical learning, getting actual experience in the different functions and features of entrepreneurship. And it does, as long as you start in like a safe environment where you're not risking lots of money, or you're not putting yourself in debt, or family security or anything like that, you should start completely willing to fail, but with the attitude of, what are the lessons within the failure that I take to the next one? I just think that entrepreneurship's gone wrong generally on social media.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there saying how easy it is to start your dropshipping business, or do this or do that, and it's very easy, just go and do it. Buy this thing from Alibaba and sell it on Amazon and you'll make X amount.
But why do you think all those fail? It's because they don't have a reason that they have to.
Yeah,
they have to work.
It's an easy side hustle.
It's a side hustle to make quick money. It doesn't work. Like, of course, there will be people that have made loads of money on dropshipping, but I would bet that the people that have done that had no other choice but to succeed in doing that. But if you're in a comfortable job and you're looking to make a side hustle, or even if you have a low-paying job and you're just looking to make a side hustle, you're not going to put what you need to make it work. And when you hit some hurdles, you probably get, dropshipping doesn't work. That course that I took was wrong and it's a lie. Well, I don't think so. I think it's just you didn't really want it enough. You didn't need it to work.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And I want to come back to your story so then we can get into the next bit as well. With you finished Placeable, you got to a point where you didn't want to do it anymore. Take me through that period of your life. We lived together at that point. That was a significant turning point for you in your life. Take me through it. Yeah,
that was the quarter life crisis. So it started way before. So I'll start at the end. I kind of had a complete mental breakdown. Actually started with you when you asked me like how I was, and just kind of like broke down on the sofa. But it started 7 or 8 months prior to that. Just as the economy was turning, it was becoming very difficult to bring on new clients. And prior to that, it was a really smooth flow for us. Then we lost about 80% of our existing clients. Amongst that, I'd started a venture builder where I helped yourself and other people start businesses. And it was just a really naive decision. So I started the venture builder to have some more fulfillment or enjoyment in the work that I was doing, to escape the fact that I hated recruitment. I hated it with an absolute passion. All the work associated with that business, just, can't imagine anything worse. Now I think back to it.
On that, you got to a point where you couldn't walk into the office without being overwhelmed by anxiety, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And it was this very much a physical attachment, which I actually, to be fair, when I had my concussions in rugby, I was okay unless I went onto the pitch where it happened. Even when I went back a year later, when I went back to that pitch, I felt really foggy.
Yeah.
And you've actually had that as well. And it's a symptom of anxiety and almost a symptom of trauma.
Yeah, that was towards the back end of it. So there was the economic difficulties. So the business was going to die. I had a business partner and an employee to look after. I also had to care for 2 first-time founders.
One of which was me, by the way.
One of which was you, who, and because of the personality I have, which is I'll take things on. I took everything on. I took the emotional challenges, the practical challenges of the first-time founders, the stress and anxiety of the entire business. I'm like, right, my shoulders, I'll fix it. So then I worked ludicrously hard to get a very large contract, which we then had to deliver against amongst commercial challenges. And that 6-month patch, I was just like, right, suppress. Nothing, wasn't going to show it much. I might have the odd, I really don't like work at the moment, but I wasn't sharing just how bad I hated it. And yeah, it got to the point where when I had a call associated with place was work, or when I walked into the office, my whole body would fill up with tension and stress, and got to the point where I couldn't go there.
So take me through the decision making then, because it was quite a large decision to go, I've started this company with my cousin and now I want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Take me through that.
After I broke down, I didn't know what was wrong, but I knew something was wrong that was big enough that I had to give it a lot of attention. And therefore, in my mind, this comes back onto that impulsive nature, I thought that the only way I could do it was to basically say goodbye to everything that I'd done and have entirely free schedule just to focus on myself. So I, within 2 weeks, made an agreement with Toby to sell him my shares in the business. I spoke with yourself and Ollie about kind of removing myself from that kind of work, and entered a patch where I didn't know what was going to be coming next, other than I wanted to kind of get my head and heart right.
And that was from mental and physical. You wanted to get yourself back to normal. And I think you won't even mind saying, you saw someone at the time, you really got into the weeds there and got to quite a low point. But it was a little bit of a Phoenix story of you went right to the bottom in order to build up properly on good foundations. Yeah,
but I did 12 weeks of therapy, and the first 5 weeks were awful. Just made things so much worse to try and kind of uncover dark truths about yourself. And I'd never asked myself, I'd never had like a stigma against using a therapist or anything like that, but I certainly probably had a bit of an attitude like, I don't need that, and it was one of the best things I've ever done. Over that 12 weeks, I needed it. And it was, I kind of liken that time to, I was like a block of ice and I needed to thaw out, in order to work out, I need to become fluid, more like water, to understand what my next move was going to be. And I only knew a couple of things at that time, which was like, I need to get away. I need to be away from this environment, this place, these people, and go out alone and see what happens. And that's what I did. I moved to Colombia.
Yeah, and that came up after a lot of soul searching. I remember the period as well. It was genuinely not knowing what to do at all. And then you found Colombia. Now, take me through, this is the sort of, if the Phoenix is burnt, it's come back to life in Colombia. Talk me through that period of your life.
Well, so that was September, and the big question I had asked myself before going out there was like, what's the point? What's the point in it? And that was the question I was on a mission to answer. I'd also at that point kind of thought out enough to have this a little bit of exuberance for a new challenge. So I'd read the Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, and I became obsessed with, all right, the last life was all work, no play. This new life's going to be play, a little bit of work. So that chapter was really fun initially, followed by a really bad period again. Like it was kind of like a false high. I made some great friends in Colombia initially. That I was there for 2 months, and after the first month, that first batch of friends left, and I entered a really low phase again. And it kind of reminded me that I have consistently been reliant on other people as like kind of a crutch rather than being truly happy and well and confident like in myself. And again, at the time that I started to look at pain as something positive. There's an opportunity within it. That didn't relieve the pain in any way, shape, or form. Like I would say that second month in Colombia was not as bad as when I had the breakdown, but very, very bad in terms of like my mentality. But I felt like I developed some systems and some programs in my head of how to deal with it. So after Colombia, I went to Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, which was all really good experiences, but I didn't love them as much as I loved Colombia. And then for 5 months from January, went back to Medellin and had a wonderful time.
And you also, when you went out there, now for anyone who knows Joey, he was the most social media phobic person. He didn't do any social media at all. Maybe like 20 posts on Instagram with no other presence anywhere. You decided you were going to document everything, which was quite uncomfortable for you initially.
That was because of you, actually. So
my fault, was it?
It was your fault. Yeah, all of this is your fault. I was going to create a blog, I think, or a newsletter. And you said to me, why don't you film it? And you quite rightly made the point that, you've got to get over that. It's like a hurdle to get over. So I took the challenge on and started recording myself and documenting the very transparent journey of what happened in the past, i.e. the breakdown, and what I was trying to achieve. I did about 50 posts over six months, primarily recording my face talking. I became comfortable with talking on camera for sure, but I didn't really have a huge amount of transaction or interest in what I was talking about. I've never really liked social media, which is ironic with where I am now.
Yeah, and for context, Joey started off recording himself, doing 10 minutes walking around Clapham Common, explaining your feelings. You progressed that to recording business things on your laptop, talking to it, talking to the camera, almost like a therapy session. You have told stories on there, and nothing really worked in terms of getting traction. You even looked into the sort of, how do you crack social media?
That's when it changed. So like prior, I was just going whatever I thought was interesting, and at points it was a form of therapy to me, like talking. And I nearly didn't post that, but I thought I had a conversation with my housemate at the time, and he said, if it can help one person, it's worth posting. So I was like, all right, go on, then I'll put it out there. I got a really good reaction to that. This is where the difference between social media success being like really, really high numbers or having an impact to the followers that you have. I wanted to build a kind of social capital. So I wanted to accelerate the amount of followers that I had, knowing that it provided a good platform for future businesses, basically.
You didn't know what that was. It's just, It's very helpful to have following no matter what you're doing.
Exactly. At that time, I was surrounded by people that were doing it. Most digital nomadic entrepreneurs are trying to build social capital. And I thought, well, I should be doing this as well. And that was the point back in around about January that I started to take it seriously. So I took a course, like a 3-hour course. I learned the fundamentals, like the science that sits behind posts that work. Started to implement some of that, and I got about a 10x success on TikTok, but a 0x success on Instagram. And I was so frustrated that I'd invested in a course, like financially invested in a course, and the time and the research. Then I started to do my own analysis of social media and what was working and what wasn't working.
And what was working and what wasn't working.
In my area of entrepreneurship, controversial and aggressive opinions were working. So that is the likes of Alex Hormozy talking very aggressively about like a system and strategy that works.
Very frank, isn't he? He's
very frank. It's like, this is how it's done, and I, I'm not calling out Alex, and nor that I don't think he'll ever see this, but it was bullshit advice, like terrible advice. The oversimplification that he put into it just astounded me. And then I started to look at what wasn't performing, so I could have that like view of, okay, here's what works, here's what doesn't work. And everything that didn't work, didn't get big growth, actually was far more useful because it was said in more of a normal human way. It was backed up by stats and information. So the things that were actually helpful, or I learned from, were the posts that had 500 views rather than 500,000 views. And that was a real frustration.
Is that a realization as well, that it's not necessarily about giving value? A lot of people say it's about giving value, but when you actually look at the evidence, it's not.
Oh, it's not valuable at all. Like it's a cesspit of false information, social media, and it's one of the reasons I hate it so much, because it's all about engagement. It's not about quality. You know, YouTube is a far better way to go get quality than TikTok or Instagram Reels. But that's the reality. People are fighting for space on your algorithm. You know, they're fighting to be on your phone, and the things that get, and the algorithm suits things that where there's lots of comments or lots of things being shared or tagged. So if you say something controversial, it's more likely that you're going to give your opposite opinion to it, rather than if it's something you agree with, you're not going, oh yeah, I agree with that. And therefore, these influencers or these people creating content, they're designing content to be controversial, knowing that probably it's false or not entirely correct or entirely true.
Now, it is funny when you see people working the algorithm, and I've seen one where apparently if you watch a post more than once, you let it replay, it benefits the algorithm. So they put a massive long bit of text on it, but the video is only 2 seconds. Yeah. So you have to watch it 5-6 times before you've read the button. It's like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean,
read the caption. It is, and you have to stay on the video while you read the caption. It will replay. It's kind of cheating.
Oh, they're trying to hack the algorithm, and it works a lot of the time. But the funniest one is when they purposely do something weird, you know, that will cause people to go, did he really do that? There's this guy that eats a hot dog from the middle rather than from the ends, right, in the middle of a normal video, and everyone's commenting, did anybody see how he ate that hot dog? And it just blew up because of that. So once I did the course, I knew what all these strategies were, and I started to see them, and I'm like, this is just awful. Like, it really frustrated me at the time how it was being done. I tried to do it myself in a way that I felt was equally value-centric, so like having a really, really good hook and shorter videos and more well-edited, and it still didn't really work.
And that brings us to, it kind of changed for you. At one point, you went, I think, 50 posts you delivered in a fairly short period of time.
About 6.5 months.
6.5 months. And then you did one post. You know what? I'll let you tell it. Talk me through that post.
Yes, that post got 2 million views, and that was around a social transaction. So I offered 49% equity to the 6-figure business that I was building to one of my followers at random. And for me, it was a test at the end of the day. Ultimately, like, it was a test to see if something like this would work. Because at the time you had Tim Nacky, who was doing the blackjack, you know, I'll bet 10 cents to every follower I've got. And I saw this trend, and I thought, okay, this is quite a new trend actually. Maybe I could jump on the back of this social transaction trend. Equity in the business was unique to me, and I thought it was crazy enough that people would buy into it, and they did. But for me, it was actually quite risk-free, because I wasn't going to give away the equity until I had 49,000 followers. And with that 49,000 followers, I would be able to have a platform to sell and make money in other streams. So
it's funny your voice goes up when you say that word as well, because it's almost like there's this dirty element of monetizing a following, which you didn't do, by the way.
And I'm not doing.
And you're not doing.
No.
However, it has that like sell.
Yeah, it's like
it's almost like, I don't want to say it, but that is essentially what people do in the long run with a following.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I was called. So I hit the 50,000 in 2 days.
Yeah, take me through that. I remember it was 7 days, and you went from.
It was basically 25,000 a day for 4 days.
Yeah,
and it was like 110,000 at its peak, and I really couldn't believe it at the time, and I was so anxious. I completely crumbled, because whilst this wasn't a reality in my head, there was a huge amount of pressure. Pressure from other people. I kept thinking like I was in Wembley, and I was surrounded by 90,000 people.
And they were watching your every move.
Yeah,
in actual fact.
Yeah, because I had thousands and thousands of DMs. I had about 10,000 at one point DMs.
Wow.
And they were a blend of people wishing me well, how cool this was. There was a blend of people just telling me to give them the equity. And then there was another group of people who were telling me the really tough things that are going on in their life. And I felt awful reading all of these things. Like, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these people that have terrible circumstances that wanted my help. So I felt very guilty that I couldn't help everyone. And then there was a pressure on myself. But also there was this group who just hated me.
Yeah.
Like, there was a good few hundred people who were calling me a scammer. They hoped my business would die. Someone said that they would kill me if they didn't get the equity. And it got to a point where I was like...
Sorry about that, by the way.
Yeah, it got to a point where I found it so stressful and so uneasy that I just kind of crumbled in myself. And I was weirdly in like a mountain lodge in Medellin to escape the city for a couple of days as this all blew up. So I was isolated at the time, which I don't know if it was a good or a bad thing.
You also tried to give away the equity 3 times,
yeah,
and it was proved harder than you thought.
Oh yeah, really hard. The first guy who got the equity, he didn't want the risk associated with the business, which was his choice. I mean, it was very low. It's a very low risk business anyway. So I went back to do it again, and that person didn't respond. I then did it again, and that person didn't respond. And it got to the point where I was like, I've lost all credibility.
You can't go out again and say, I'm doing another one, because people start to think, okay.
How could I? Oh yeah, and then between the second and the third one, I said, like, right, we're going to move this, because they didn't respond, let's move it to email so that I have a clearer line to communicate with you, because my message might be going into your like spam or whatever's like non-follower box. And then that's when the hate really went up from like the people saying that I'm just trying to collect data and I'm going to sell it on and it's all a scam. And that was really frustrating, because I was trying to do the right thing.
But I know what you're like as well, and I know that people saying that really hits you in the values almost. You kind of go, that's really not me. However, I can see I'm trying to give away this equity and I can't, and it looks like that's what I am doing, but I'm not.
Yeah, it really annoyed me, because I pride myself on that. I'm quite integral, and I don't like being told that I'm something that I know I'm not, but you can't ultimately react. With a lot of them, I met them with love and would say, I'd respond to them saying things like, I really hope you're okay, and if you want to have a chat, I'm here. And they would always DM me afterwards apologizing. But I said that through such gritted teeth. Like, it really frustrated me that they called me out in public.
But that's the thing with criticism. I actually struggle with now is you need constructive criticism to grow in life in general, but it's very hard to determine. It's kind of key to determine between what is constructive criticism and what is criticism that comes from a place of someone else's insecurity. And like you say there, someone criticizes you, you respond with love, and suddenly they're actually like, that comes from their insecurity. However, maybe say I had said to you, Joey, actually I think the way you're doing that is not really in line with you. You probably go, oh, that's... But actually telling the line there with people you don't know is very hard.
Oh yeah, it's very hard. I mean, with me with feedback, I often don't listen to feedback. The two ways I will is if it's from someone that I respect, I will listen, and if it's done in the correct way. So if it's not just hate, I'm going to listen and take it in and try and improve. But if it's given in a way which is a brash, aggressive statement, I'm not going to recognize it as something I should care about, but I still feel pain as a result of receiving it, which was the difficulty at the start of having that following.
And if I'm right, that post was your last sort of attempt at getting out there and trying the techniques.
Yes, that was my last shot in the dark of I'll try a social transaction, and I got very lucky. Like ultimately, very, very lucky. I don't know why the algorithm favoured that post, because subsequent ones would get a few 100,000, but nothing like 2 million. So yeah, I don't really know. For me, I have no clue whether I'll ever get a post that gets that kind of transaction again. And I'm kind of starting to lean away from trying to force it and just go into very much authentic and organic content that suits me.
Well, that said, you haven't posted in about a month, have you?
No, because I don't have anything interesting to say. That's the truth. I don't want to be a slave to social media. It's something that I think can add to my life if I manage it in the right way. But nor do I want to just do it for the sake of doing it at the risk of my personal enjoyment for life. No, it's there to serve me, not me serve it, is my attitude towards it. And that's made me very comfortable with having a following. If you want to gain a following, you have to play into the algorithm. So unfortunately, you have to do the things that will likely make your content less authentic. And that's really a kind of a fundamental issue with someone that's starting to build a following, is they're going to have to kill a little bit of themselves off in order to, or sacrifice a little bit of their authentic style just to get to the point where they can have the following to then make the impact that they want to after. And that's kind of the place I think that I found myself in, is I had to do the social transaction to get the following. And now I'm able, with that following, to do some stuff that's much more authentic to me.
Now, this is the thing I want to get into with this, because right before you posted that and throughout you moving to Colombia, and anyone starting a business will somewhat relate with this, you are in probably the most vulnerable position you can be in when you're starting things and you're trying things. And often you will ask for help from friends, family. What do you think you learned in that period?
Of asking for help?
In regards to help and people around you.
I think I'm slightly different to most, is one thing I've learned in this area, which is I'm very much prepared to fail. Whilst I don't like the feeling of failure, I'm very prepared to fail, which is why when it came to posting, I didn't really ask too many people, like, what would you do? I would be self-sufficient and look at posts and wonder what I should do and give it a go and post it. I think I wish I was the kind of person that would go out and seek advice at the start, but my track record, even to this day, is actually going out and doing it for myself, because I've seen the value in learning through pain and failure.
And then in terms of, so I found when I start business, especially when you're vulnerable at the start and you do need help, anyone that helps you in that period, you are unbelievably grateful for, because they don't necessarily need to. They could definitely get away with not giving any support. But anyone who likes your LinkedIn post, the first client that gives you a go, you have no idea how much you appreciate them giving you that shot, because they don't need to, and they're actually taking a risk in doing that. But you are so grateful for giving you that shot, you want to give them everything, and you want to make sure they weren't wrong to do so. And I don't think people realise the power of doing a small little action, sharing your post, liking this, recommending you to someone, how far that goes, how much you remember that going forward. Once you've slightly made it, it's actually less valuable. And that start, when you're so vulnerable, it's crucial. There's
lots of people who sharing your post will be off-brand with them, which is, I understand it, but I don't agree with it. I think it's like the absolute bare minimum you can do to support a friend.
I think that's the interesting thing about building businesses as well. You don't need to have something revolutionary or new. You can pick something someone's already doing, put your own spin on it, deliver it well, or you can pick the exact same thing and deliver it really well.
Yeah.
The market is not, it's not all monopolies.
Well, if you look at all businesses, 95% of them fit into the improver category, i.e., it's not new. You are copying someone else and putting your spin on it, or trying to do it better in your own way. You then have about 4.9%, which are innovators, the people that kind of like add something new that wasn't really done before, but it's still within the same existing product or area. And then you have the absolute creators, the ones that can cause tectonic shifts in industries, such as OpenAI and ChatGPT. But they're so few and far between. But everyone thinks you have to be part of the top 5%. Yeah. No, just be part of the 95%. And in most cases, people want to have fun with business. People want to live a life. They start a business to serve them, not the other way around.
Yeah, I think that's something that's quite Western as well in our thinking, is that, we very much live to work. I spent some time down in the south of France in the Pyrenees, which is quite rural France, and they work to live. And there was someone who had this amazing restaurant and a chateau up on the hill. And I said to my dad when we were down there, I said, "Can we go and eat there?" And he said, "No, it's closed." I said, "Why is it closed?" He said, "Well, apparently he opens it for 3 months, makes as much money as he needs for the rest of the year, and then closes it."
Yeah.
Can you imagine doing that in the UK?
Oh, it's unheard of.
Absolutely not.
But it would probably cause a lot of popularity.
Yeah.
Because there's scarcity in it. I just think we have everything backwards here. To that story, we believe there's a certain way of doing things. And the moment you broaden your horizons and you start to meet other people doing different things that go against your initial beliefs, you're kind of like, like maybe I could do that. And I think the purpose of what I'm going to do is a selfish element of excitement for me, but equally, hopefully going to make other people turn their head slightly and go, maybe I could do that too.
So with that in mind, the next business you're moving on to is an exciting one for me as well. Tell us about that one.
We're going to be running a luxury rhino conservation retreat in South Africa for 1 or 2 weeks with various different groups potentially. The beauty in that one is it costs £0 $0 to start. You're bolting onto an existing service and creating a margin on it and getting to experience, walking with wild cheetahs or working with dehorning rhinos for conservation efforts and speaking to patrol pilots amongst doing safaris and staying in luxury lodges. The idea of that is so unbelievably simple and cheap for anyone to do, and we are going to prove that it is possible.
Yeah, and I think all you're doing is bringing clients, essentially, whacking a little bit on top, and then get to go to an amazing place.
You're a glorified travel agent.
Yeah.
But do you really care?
But for 4 weeks a year. It's not, it really isn't rocket science, but I think that is the trick with business. A lot of people think, no, not for me. It's a lot simpler than people think.
For sure.
But without oversimplifying it, there is work that goes into that. In order to get clients to go on that, you have to put in work. But the idea itself is very simple.
And it's just whether you want to, just like the person that owns that restaurant, you want to work 3 months a year and have 9 months off to do whatever you want. It's carving out or creating a business that fits the lifestyle that you want. And for my first 5 businesses, I didn't do that. It was all, the business was life, and I'm past that now. I want it to be for me as much as possible.
Most of the businesses require certain set of skills. If you were speaking to someone looking to start a business and you had to boil it down, because everything can be nuanced and contextual and everything requires different things. If you had to boil it down, what is the core? What should someone focus on if they wanted to start a business?
Sales. Just sales. Your ability to understand pain and extract value from pain is the number one skill that a bootstrapped founder needs, because what I see frequently is people going into marketing. I'm going to do marketing, but nobody cares about you. Marketing is there once you have a brand. That's like a private, unless you have lots and lots of money to chuck into ads, which most first-time founders don't. So my advice would be to learn the skill of sales. And if you're able to go out and approach clients you want to work with confidently and uncover pain or share value in what you're doing, your probability of getting early stage clients is significantly higher.
Okay, and now say I'm listening to this, I've heard you say sales. What would you point people toward to learn sales?
This is one where a mentor makes a huge difference. I learned sales from my boss at Fujitsu, where I learned all my sales. And seeing someone else in action doing it is very, very powerful in terms of what you're going to absorb. So my advice would be go out and try and find existing founders and see if they will help you or mentor you or coach you. There's a lot of people out there that will, and you're going to get a lot of no's, but that's almost part of learning it. On top of that, there's actually a very good SDR, like cold calling course that I can recommend. I have no affiliation to this person, by the way.
Plug away.
Chris Ritson. Follow him on LinkedIn. His course on cold calling is absolutely superb. I think it's about £99. It'd be worth every penny if that's what you're going to be doing. Of course, going onto YouTube, but you're going to have a huge amount of different processes, but there is no substitute to just picking up the phone or writing the email. Just do it and fail and be comfortable that you're going to learn based on your results. Because the other part of sales is making sure it's in your own style. It's very difficult to perfectly replicate something that's worked for someone else. So you kind of need to try a lot and build what your version of it is.
I completely agree with you on that one. I think there is no substitute for getting out there and just trying to learning through experience, because your brain attaches a lot more learning to the experience than, let's say, the theory. But having them together is a real nice compliment. And let's be transparent. So Joey and I have been cold calling this morning for the South Africa trip, because that's an element of it. You need to fill spots. You need to get people involved. I called one person, and all they said was, right, what do you want? Okay, you want 1 minute, which is actually not a bad result for a cold call. And then they proceeded to tell me for the next 5 minutes how I don't know, they didn't know what I'm selling. They don't really know why I'm calling. I need to understand my product, this and that. And you kind of...
And that was your first cold call?
I've never cold called. It's always been a very different style of selling. But then you cold call and you realise it's not the end of the world, but there's no substitute for going, okay, right, I need to introduce this better, I need to do this better. Cold calling it's quite a funny experience. If you can do it with someone, it's actually quite an experience.
It's absolutely terrible if you're doing it alone and you get loads of rejections and you've never done it before. But once you're a little bit more hardened to it, you can laugh at the bad calls, because they'll come thick and fast. There's someone who actually speaks about how to gamify cold calling. It's how many no's can I get? How many no's, and and having a competition, you and I, like, who's going to get the most no's today? Because the logic is you're eventually going to get a yes if you keep going and going and going. Toby, my old business partner, used to say that we only need one yes in 100, and that would keep him going through all the no's. Yeah,
and I think I actually used to work with a group of SDRs, having not actually had to go and cold call myself, but understand it is a hard thing to do. However, that I said to them, this skill that you're now picking up at the age of 18, 19 is invaluable. Even if you know you're going to leave here in 2 months, don't coast through, because the skills you'll pick up, understanding how to call someone, get into a conversation, sell something, move the conversation forward, get it to the end that you want it to, no matter what you do moving forward, it will help you.
I think it's going to be the number one skill going forward, because in the rise of tech and AI and coding, the need for you to be able to code is going to go away. That's old news now. AI will eventually be able to do it better than humans, quicker and cheaper. The softer skills, like coming to the arts and selling, I really do think they're going to start to kind of trump everything. So if you want a lifetime skill, knowing how to sell opens up a huge amount of doors, both outside and inside of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. And okay, advice to someone who's about to start, what should they do?
I'm going to, I can't remember the person that said this, but this is not mine first and foremost, but I think it is the most superb advice. And that is essentially take a skill and an interest area that you have and package it up into something really light, and don't start a business. Highlight your top 10 to 20 people that you would love to work with, approach them, offer to work for them for free for a month, and all you want at the end of it is a reference. There's no obligation to pay anything. And at the end of that month, what you will likely see if you've done a good job from an outside perspective is probably some will want to work with you and they'll start paying you. Or you'll have a bunch of references to then go and take to all the competitors and build a business from that with a leg up. So you're sacrificing a month to build potential revenue and references. From a personal perspective, within a month, you're going to learn if you want to do this business long term or not. Don't worry about making this perfect product or service. Just go out and do it and see if it works. The best advice that I've ever heard. I wish that I'd known that sooner for my own business, but also for the people that I've coached in the past.
I think that's very true, especially as we spoke right at the start of this. You don't know what you don't know. So trying to get something perfect when you don't know what you don't know is not a great idea. Go and find out, and you'll know a lot more, and you then can create a more perfect model if there is such a thing. I think that's very good advice.
What would yours be?
My advice, it would be along the same lines of just go and don't be afraid of getting it wrong. And it's so common, but there's these things that are common for a reason. Go out, get it wrong, you learn loads more.
Yeah.
Someone that's failed all the time has loads of ways not to do it, so their advice is very valuable. Also, you don't go anywhere. I always use the metaphor, if you're stood at a path that goes into a forest, you can only ever see to about the first turn. So you can try and plan as much as you want. The only way to figure it out is to walk down the path.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you find all this stuff out that you couldn't have found out at the start. So it's kind of similar stuff, but that's the most useful advice at the start, I think.
It's interesting because this whole topic of failure, my series on social media post during the course was the diary of an unsuccessful entrepreneur. And I got so much worry from people that followed me. Like, are you okay? And I had to explain, like, no, this is just trying to show the reality that failure isn't always a bad thing, because it's kind of led me to here today. So I think societally, we have this negative view of failure. And to your point, it's a hard barrier to overcome. But once you accept that failure is part of the process and you embrace it as something, yes, it's going to really sting and hurt at the time. But if you're willing to look for the results, the answers in it, your ability to bulletproof your next business or the subsequent or the subsequent or the subsequent, so much higher, infinitely higher.
That's a big thing as well that I see. I work with a lot of management groups, a lot of teams, and when people are worried about getting it wrong, they're worried about being blamed, they're very much averse to taking accountability, because I don't want to be blamed, therefore it's not me, it's someone else. And it's a real superpower, something in sport that people do a lot, some good teams, some teams not, but when they're reviewing performance, they very much look at themselves and they go, how can I improve this situation? Now, when you do that, your performance is going to improve. If you're only looking at how others can improve, you're not going to. You're capping your own performance. And I understand why you do it, but if you're a founder, you shouldn't really have anyone blaming you other than you. So you need to be super self-reflective. How can I improve? How can I improve? How can I improve? If you're always doing that, you will improve. If you're looking elsewhere and outward, capping yourself. Yeah,
and in most cases, in fact, a lot of founders won't want to hear this, ultimately it's their responsibility for the bulk of the problems in a company. You know, they have the power to fix it in most cases. And often founders have quite a large ego, and it's quite hard to accept that feedback when it's coming from someone that you are paying or is kind of below you in the rankings.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely vital. And the other understanding you probably need is, and you'll realize that if you start a business, no one is coming to save you. I feel like I had the rest of my life, you always kind of have, you have an agent, or you have your team, or you have your friends at school, your teachers, all this that are trying to help you succeed. You start a business, yes, your parents are going to support you, and they're going to give you encouragement and stuff, but no one's coming to pay your bills. No one is coming to make some sales for you if you're on your own. If it fails, it's only on you. So you don't have a choice to be accountable.
Yeah, and that's kind of the game in it. Like it's the you can gamify all of this and try and find some level of enjoyment. Like I personally enjoy the thrill of backs against the wall. We're kind of, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear.
Do.
We're fucked.
Yeah.
Like that is typically when I will step up I get quite bored when it's comfortable, and a bit like that story I told of Placeable, when everything was kind of crumbling, I took it on my shoulders to go and do it. And I think if you have that trait in you, that quality of like, when things go wrong, I step up, you probably have quite good core fundamentals for being a good founder.
And I think that's where you say anyone can start a business, but you do need certain characteristics to start a successful business. And one of them is you have to not mind a bit of risk and a bit of things going a bit wrong and be able to thrive in that.
Oh, risk is everything. If you're not willing to take a risk, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur, because you're going to fail. You're not going to get what you want out of it. And if you are a risk taker, yes, you're going to put yourself in some promiscuous situations, but you have that opportunity to hit the jackpot. And I don't really know how anyone who is a risk taker can enjoy being employed.
Yeah, I think that's what they feel they have to leave. But it's this element as well. I know if I sit on the sofa and watch like Netflix, I will suffer. But in the same vein, if I need to rev it up, I will receive those rewards. I will be directly responsible for my outcome. Whereas in a business, there's a little bit more constraint on you. Yes, you can perform for a long time, but you're reliant on other people to give you a reward. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I say, right, I'm doing 3 days of absolute ridiculously aggressive BD, I'm going to get some business, and I'll be the recipient of that.
Yeah, you get the rewards, and you get hit with a stick if you fail. But it's so much better when you get the reward, and you've created your own reward. You've put food on your own plate. Like, there is something wonderful about that feeling that can't really be replicated elsewhere. There's a lot of pride that you feel within it, but the opposite of that is a huge amount of negative emotion when someone doesn't like what you've built, because you feel like, oh, they don't like kind of me.
It's personal.
This is my baby. How can you not like it?
I offered someone my course and I'll come in and code. They just said, I really don't want that at all. I remember taking it, thinking, that's me. If I was selling someone else's product, you kind of, you don't want it? Okay, well, there we are. But that's literally me coming in to speak to your group, and you don't want that at all. Okay, brilliant. On to the net. But
how do you feel now, though? Because you've been in it for over a year. Like, what's your attitude to those kind of comments?
A lot easier, because I realise as well that I can give a talk, and they can give me a round of applause and say you're brilliant, and I can know it wasn't a good talk. And on the other side, I can give a brilliant talk by my standards, and they just kind of don't really respond. And I have to judge myself by what I know to be good, as opposed to the group out on the day. Maybe it's right after lunch and everyone's sleepy and they're not actually that focused. Maybe it is doing me, but I'll always try and think, how can I do that better? But it's not. I pitch my business to someone, they see a 30-second snapshot of everything I do. It's not about what I am, it's about what they've seen and where they're at as well. They might have had a big crunch on their budget, they might have had this, and they might be in a bad mood. There's so many things that can affect what they do. It really hurt me. It still hurts me sometimes.
Well, that's the thing, though. I think, like, again, trying to remove the stigma on entrepreneurship. You're not this like beast that feels nothing. No, you feel hurt when you get those. Everyone does. I refuse to believe founders say, nah, I don't care at all. No, I think everyone has a heart, and they're hurt when someone doesn't like what they do. But you have the knowledge, like, okay, that's business. Like, that happens, and that's fine, and we carry on going anyway. Lots of people don't start a business because they think that you have to be this bulletproof, perfect entrepreneur. It's just so far from the truth. Every entrepreneur goes through the same feelings. They just know how to cope with it.
One other thing I want to come on to, sort of final things, a slightly controversial opinion with starting a business on whether you should start a business with your passion, in something that you absolutely love, your passion. Now, personally, I don't think you should. Just because, so we can go studies or stories on this, but you look at the studies, if you do something because of an intrinsic motivation, when you add an extrinsic reward to that, intrinsic motivation decreases. Loads of studies have been replicated on this, and personally, as a rugby player, I played rugby since I was 7. At 18, I became a professional. I did something for intrinsic motivation. I started getting paid for it. Not a lot, lad, but regardless, you get paid for it. You add that extrinsic reward, by the time I got to the end of my career, I was telling myself I was enjoying rugby, but I was not enjoying the sport, even though it's essentially the same thing. And I see that all over the place. When I retired, I love conservation and wildlife, but I think trying to do that as my main job, where I rely on extrinsic reward to validate whether I'm doing well at it, will destroy it. So I'd rather do it as my passion 20% of the time and do something I like as my job, but not necessarily something I love. Where do you fall on that?
I fall in a similar mindset to you, because I've seen people that have started passion-based businesses and it's completely corrupted their passion. It also creates a huge amount of bias. So when they're going out to sell, they can't understand why other people don't like their business, but it's because they're so biased that they can't even kind of see past it. I think following your passion's good if you're under employment, because you don't have the stresses and the clouds that surround an entrepreneur associated with finance and risk. So if you love animals, go and work in a zoo. I think that's a great idea. If it is just you want a passion-based life rather than a balanced financial passion, all that kind of stuff. When it comes to entrepreneurship, I don't charge for helping people because I don't want my love for entrepreneurship to be tarnished by money. But it's very easy to think that, oh yeah, I love doing this and therefore I should charge for it. But I agree with you. I think it will corrupt your passion and maybe turn you against the thing that you love most.
And I think there's a lot of confirmation bias with people who live their passion. I think they like to say, oh, no, I'm just passionate. It's not like working. I just love it. I'm not sure if it's true. I definitely had that in rugby. I used to almost convince myself, you love rugby. You do love rugby. You do love rugby, without actually looking in front of me going, you don't enjoy going in anymore. You don't really enjoy the sessions anymore. You stress about the next contract all the time. And I didn't actually enjoy it. And since I've stopped, I've not really wanted to go and play again.
Yeah. So
I think it's destroyed that sort of intrinsic motivation to go and play. I don't really watch rugby anymore. Which I found sad. Whereas with wildlife now, it gets to be this thing I get to go and do every now and then and love it. Whereas if I did it full time, would I kind of be a bit like, oh my God, if I see another animal?
Probably. And it also, if you have that kind of passion, which I think is relevant, I know you and conservation, to have a passion that falls so far outside of work is something that I'm extremely envious of. Because as an entrepreneur, you need to escape occasionally. You just need to get out of it and go into a place where your head's going to be clear and you're not going to think about the stresses. For me, going to play golf is that way. Or when I was in Colombia, having a dance lesson. It's so important to have a passion or an interest that you can escape your normal world when it all gets a bit too much. So yeah, if I had to make a firm decision, is starting a passion-based business a good thing? I would say no.
Yeah, fair enough. Joey Speed, I think we'll finish it there. I want to thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And best of luck with your endeavours coming up.
Thank you, and you too.